Good afternoon, everyone. Before we begin, closed captioning for this session is being provided by PRI Court Reporting and is made available by clicking the CC tab at the bottom of the screen. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this webinar on navigating financial aid and payment options. I am your host today. I'm Carolyn Morales, and I'm the Assistant Dean of Diversity at the Graduate School. As the daughter of migrant workers and the first in my family to earn a PhD, the struggle to understand how to navigate financial aid, higher ed rather, was an incredibly lonely process. Even though I had the grades, I actually didn't believe that I had the capacity to be successful at a four-year university. As a first-generation Latinx, I often found myself lost during this process and struggled candidly to ask for help. I didn't have the words then to describe the feeling, but I know now I struggled with imposter syndrome. That feeling followed me all the way to my PhD program. And that journey has inspired me to become, candidly, a higher ed professional and really develop my passion to create pathways for future generations of students like yourself to successfully pursue their academic goals. As such, just a few things before we begin today's session. In response to the current health crisis and its impact on our campus this fall semester, Ohio State has shifted our graduate student recruitment strategy to virtual webinars. This series is designed to guide you from start to finish through all the facets of the graduate application process. Each session will be recorded and posted in the graduate school's website approximately a week after the live session date. If you have any technical difficulties during the webinar, we suggest you leave the webinar and rejoin to the link that we sent via email earlier today. We also recommend shutting down other programs during this session as they slow down the video and audio. If you have any questions at all during the presentation, please submit your questions using the Q&A tab, or if you have any comments, please feel free to share them in the chat box. And lastly, please take a moment to fill out the survey that will pop up at the end of the session so that we can make every effort to improve the quality of this series. We really welcome and appreciate your feedback. Now I'd like to take this moment to introduce today's facilitator, Senior Buckeye Link Counselor Jessica Tweed, who works for Buckeye Link in the Office of Student Academic Services. Jessica assists the OSU community with questions related to financial aid, the bursar, or registration services. Please welcome our speaker, Jessica Tweed.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for hanging out with us today, and thank you, Carolyn, for the intro there. So I'm going to go ahead and start a screen share here and get my presentation up for everybody to see. Give me just a second to get this shared. And go here and there. Okay, perfect. All right, so when we get started today, as Carolyn said, I'm going to be talking through the financial aid process for graduate students, so people who are applying for grad school as well as current graduate students, and what that looks like from the financial aid office perspective. So just to kind of narrow that down a little bit, there's specific types of financial aid that are managed directly through a financial aid office. So we're going to go over what that looks like, how you apply for those, and how to kind of interpret all the financial information you read about grad school, from the cost of attending to looking at an aid package to how to know what smart borrowing is with loans if you decide to use loans, those kinds of things. So we're going to talk through all those topics today as we go. And then I know at the bottom you guys will see there is a like a question and answer option to use. Let me open this up here. Give me just a second, guys. There we go. So yeah, there's a Q&A bubble. So if you have questions as we go, feel free to type them in there, and then we'll get to those as we go through the presentation. Alrighty, this and this. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started here, guys. Okay, so first we're going to start by talking about the cost of attendance piece. So I think it's really important to start out, before we start talking about how to pay for something, knowing what we're paying for and how to interpret that information. So every school that you look at for graduate school attendance is required, if they use federal financial aid awarding, to post what's called an estimated cost of attendance for their graduate programs. So this cost of attendance serves two primary functions for students, both looking at grad school programs as well as currently enrolled in a grad school program. So the first, and what becomes kind of the immediately most important, is for that financial planning piece. So the estimated cost of attendance, which we'll look at an example of here in a second from OSU's website, basically includes what you would expect your cost to be for 1 year of attending a grad school program. And it includes a couple different things, including living expenses. So it gives you kind of that whole picture of how much am I anticipating this will cost for me to participate in a program. It also helps you with budgeting because it'll help you think through, am I doing a 1-year grad program where I'll be done after 1 year, or is this a multi-year program? So I need to look at this total yearly cost and kind of anticipate that that's going to be my cost for the next couple of years. The other big function that the cost of attendance budget gives us is it sets the maximum limit of financial aid that a student can receive in one financial aid year. So the reason it also sets that limit is because any any aid that is received to go towards educational expenses has to fit within that cost of attendance budget, since we're saying that estimated budget would be the maximum amount a student would need to have to cover their year of attendance. So that's what the financial aid limit piece is. And we'll talk about this again more later on when we're talking about actual aid types. But the financial aid limit is also determined by a student's actual enrollment, which we'll talk about here. So this right here is a sample cost of attendance budget from Ohio State's website for the graduate programs. So what you'll see here is there's fields for 4 different main kind of categories. So the first is tuition and fees. This you can think about as what you're billed directly by the university to enroll in courses. Now, everything on this budget is assuming 2 semesters of full-time enrollment in a graduate program. So what that means is if maybe you're doing a 1-year grad school program, but it's one that does summer, autumn, and spring semesters instead of only autumn and spring, your cost of attendance budget is going to look a little bit different. And there is a way to also know, okay, how do I know how much to add on to my cost of attendance budget to do that budgeting piece for me personally? So we'll look at that as well. But this is basically that sample 2-semester budget for 1 year. You'll see it also includes the room and board / living expense amount. So this is what you're looking at for like rent, groceries, covering utilities, those kinds of things. And then keeping in mind with that, that amount is for those 2 semesters. So it's not for 12 months of a year living expenses. It's those like 8 to 9 months that are covered standard in an autumn and spring semester. And then we also have the books and supplies budget, which is pretty self-explanatory there. And then this miscellaneous personal, this is for things like if you're driving to and from campus or paying for a parking permit, or maybe you have to go to a laundromat to do your laundry, those kinds of things, buying your shampoo and toothpaste, all that fits in this miscellaneous and personal budget. So that's why that's built in. So this is a sample budget. But, and then I also have a comparison one here. This last one was for an Ohio resident. So something to keep in mind when you're looking at graduate schools is if you're looking at a school that's out of state when you're looking to apply, your tuition and fee budget is typically going to be higher at that school for non-resident surcharge type fees. So this is just a comparison between the two. You'll see all the other fields are the same between an Ohio and a non-Ohio resident, except for the tuition and fee line. Okay, so now down to the question of, what if I'm in a program with specialized fees, or what if I am doing one of those 3-semester programs instead of a 2-semester program? There is a way to see what your actual program fees will be. That's a little bit more specific than that cost of attendance budget. And this is just to help with when you're really kind of looking into that nitty gritty of what my education is going to cost. At Ohio State, this is all found on the registrar's website. There are fee tables out there by program that you can use to compare and look at if there are any specialized program fees, those kinds of things that may increase that cost a little bit over what is budgeted. And then this will also just help, again, if you're doing one of those one of the 3 semester programs instead of 2, to know how much more to add on for the extra semester of enrollment. Okay, so now that we know a little bit about cost, how it's determined, how we use it, let's talk about how to get aid to help cover that cost. So a lot of folks have already done a FAFSA at this point, and especially by the time they're applying for grad school. So this may look familiar, but the first step for graduate financial aid, similar to undergrad financial aid, is completing a FAFSA. The FAFSA looks at a little bit different things when you're applying as a graduate student, but it's generally a similar process. Some students, though, when they're looking at grad school, they may not have ever used the FAFSA in undergrad. So you'll see here on this screenshot that I have, this is just what the FAFSA website looks like right now for federal student aid. You'll see there's a process to start. If you're brand new to the FAFSA and you've never ever done one before, including an undergrad, then you'll use that. And then the returning user is if you've ever done a FAFSA at any time before, you'll use that login option instead. So this is just kind of a snapshot of what needs to be ready in order to do a FAFSA. So the first is the FSA ID. So the FSA ID is something that you create the very first time you ever do a FAFSA, and it ties all of that FAFSA information to you as an individual to then send out to any schools that you're applying to. So you have to create a new one the very first time. Once you've done the FAFSA once, you will continue using that same FSA ID. So that's just something to keep in mind. So say there's a 2-year gap between the last time you did the FAFSA and when you're doing it for grad school, you'll still use that old FSA ID information. So you'll probably have to do some type of recovery on it, but there's a process on their website to make that pretty straightforward. And then the second big piece that you need when you're doing a FAFSA application as a graduate applicant or graduate student is your student information. So the FAFSA always uses prior year tax information. So what that means is you're using 2 years before when you're doing the FAFSA for the tax info. So as an example, I put on here this year's FAFSA for 2020-2021 school year used 2018's tax information. So you'll want to have that prepared. There's also a way to just import your tax information directly into the FAFSA instead of manually entering it all. And it's called the data retrieval tool. So we always highly recommend using that if you filed taxes in the year that it's requesting information for. The other big piece of information you'll need is just your basic household information. So it's a little bit less involved because typically you'll just know it off the top of your head. And then I do want to talk a little bit about parent information here, because anybody who has experience with filing the FAFSA previously will know usually you have to include your parent information on the FAFSA unless you meet one of the independent status questions there. So as a graduate student, that changes. When you're a grad student, you're automatically considered independent for FAFSA purposes. So you won't have to include parent information, but it will ask if you want to include parent information. So the reason for that is because there are certain aid types, which we'll talk about here in a second, that do require the parent information to be entered in order to be reviewed for that eligibility. There's a very specific type of aid with this, so it's not most programs, but you may have to enter parent information. If you choose to enter parent information and it's just not needed for the aid type that you're evaluated for, it won't hurt you or be negative in any way. It's just the fact that adding that parent information usually takes longer to complete the FAFSA. So that's that piece there. Okay. And then once you file the FAFSA, we're going to talk about what the different types of aid are that can be awarded based on a FAFSA application specifically here first. So as a graduate student, you are eligible for different types of loans through the FAFSA depending on different eligibility pieces. There are no grants federally or specifically at Ohio State for graduate level students. So that's one big change from undergrad to grad. If you've used the FAFSA in undergrad, is when you get to the grad level, there are only loans offered from federal financial aid. So the main type of loan that most students will see on their account is this one here on the left, the unsubsidized loan. So an unsubsidized loan is a loan that has a federal lender for it, and it's going to have a set interest rate that's set by the federal government each year to determine like what interest rate that loan is going to have. Typically, the loan rate on an unsubsidized loan awarded through the FAFSA is going to be the most competitive that's out there on the market for an educational loan in that year. So there is a maximum amount that can be used of an unsubsidized loan per year, as well as across your lifetime. So that's this aggregate limit piece. So the lifetime loan limit doesn't come into play super quickly for students who are just looking into grad school. This is more so if you do a graduate program, maybe move on to another advanced degree and continue to use loans, you might start hitting that lifetime loan limit. So that's just something to keep in mind. But the biggest and the kind of most important thing I want to talk about on the unsubsidized loan is that there is that maximum amount per year, and it's typically $20,500 for the year. This can vary a little bit. There's a couple of like caveat programs where that can be a little bit higher, but since it's such a small amount of programs, I'm going to focus on this $20,500 amount. So the $20,500, let's say you're enrolled in one of the programs where you're going to go in the autumn semester and you're going to go in the spring semester. That $20,500 is going to divide evenly between the two semesters, and half of the loan will disperse out to the autumn semester and half will go out to the spring semester if you decide to use the full amount. So as long as you're enrolled half-time, which as a graduate student here is 4 credit hours or more, 4 credit hours to anything above full-time, you're eligible for that $20,500. So that's something to keep in mind. Like if you decide to go full-time and maybe your costs are a little bit higher than the total amount of the loan for that semester, the unsubsidized loan itself cannot be increased because it's a standard set amount based on like the federal regulations. So that's the most common loan type that we see is that unsubsidized loan. Then another type of loan that does exist that's a federal loan is called the health professions loan. So the eligibility for this loan, as well as the maximum amount that can be used in a year, is all based on the specific program. And as kind of explanatory in the name there, it's for very specific health professions fields. The plus side of this health professions loan, if you're in a program that's eligible for it, is that it is a subsidized loan. So what that means is that while you're enrolled in school and using that loan, and all the way up until that loan goes into repayment after your grace period, there will be no interest that's accruing on the loan. So the total amount that you borrowed your very first year of your grad program is going to be the same amount that's owed back right when you go into repayment, because there won't have been interest accumulating during that time. And then the interest starts to accrue once your loan goes into repayment. So that's why this is kind of an advantageous type of loan. This is the loan type where parent information is required to be listed on the FAFSA. If you're applying into one of these programs, typically they'll have that information on that program's website about adding that parent information so that you can be considered for this loan type. So again, it is a smaller population of students that may qualify for that, but just to kind of make you aware it is something that's out there. And then finally, the Graduate Plus loan. So this Graduate Plus loan is an additional loan application, but it is still a federal loan option. So what that means is it's still issued through a federal financial aid lender. So a lot of what we see in like a combination of aid a lot of times is like students will have the unsubsidized loan, and maybe if they need some additional loan funds for different things, they'll apply for that Graduate Plus loan for some additional funds on top of that. So this is what the application page for the Plus loan looks like. The most important thing to remember about the PLUS loan is that it is a separate application. So just doing the FAFSA alone will not have you awarded the PLUS, but you do have to have completed a FAFSA in order to apply for the PLUS loan. So you do have to have the FAFSA on file first. And then you come out here and you complete the loan application page. On the top, there's the graduate student plus loan application. And on the bottom, there's a parent plus loan application. You want to make sure to do the graduate student plus loan application. The parent application is only for students who are undergraduate students who are dependent on the FAFSA. Their parents can apply for this loan on their behalf. But as a graduate student, it has to be the graduate student who is the borrower on that loan. So basically you use this website to log in to start that application, and it all goes through that same federal student aid website where you filed the FAFSA. The other nice thing about this page is you'll see this link that says preview a read-only version of the PLUS loan application. So if you want to look at it before you start it and kind of get a feel for what the application is, this just opens a PDF for you to see what exactly you're going through when you do that PLUS loan. And then this is kind of where the cost of attendance comes back into play. Is say you decide to do a supplemental loan application for some additional funds through the PLUS loan. The maximum amount that you can receive in a PLUS loan is based on that cost of attendance budget we talked about at the very beginning. So that's where that maximum amount comes from. Okay. And then other types of aid as well that we see through the financial aid office for graduate students are a couple different sources. So the first is the special scholarships application. This is Ohio State specific, and it's also open for undergraduate students. So undergrad, graduate, really any student type can complete this application. These are all special eligibility scholarships that are issued typically by our different donors, either private donors or corporate donors, those kinds of things. All of those different funds that are set up to provide scholarship funds to Ohio State students in particular categories are all put into the same application. So there's just one application to apply for all of those things. So there are some scholarships on here that graduate students are eligible for. So I always recommend completing it. Not all students are awarded something from it each time they complete it, but I always recommend doing it each year as well that you're at Ohio State, just because our scholarships that are on there change from year to year because our donors change from year to year. So that is a resource that's out there. The name may be changing this year, but the application can always be found on the financial aid website for Ohio State. And then the other big source of financial aid that is not loan-based that we see is from external sources. So this may be separate external scholarships specifically for graduate students, as well as we also see sometimes employers. So if a student works for a certain employer, the employer pays some part of their tuition and fees, as well as community organizations, those kinds of things. So those are the two big kind of non-loan things that we see directly through the financial aid office. You'll notice that graduate fellowships and assistantships are not on here. That's just because those are all serviced through the graduate school directly. So our financial aid office doesn't specialize in those things, so I don't know a ton about how all of that is awarded. It is a resource that's out there that's directly through the graduate school though. Okay, and then one other loan option that does exist as well that I like to go over is private loans. So private loans are also set aside to cover educational expenses, much in the way of the federal loans we've talked about. But the biggest difference is a private loan, you have a private lender, so that's not federally associated. It's going to run differently in terms of interest rates and repayment plans are the two primary differences between a federal loan and a private loan. So a private loan is also a separate application similar to that PLUS loan that we talked about. And it requires a credit check. And then for private loans, we see a lot more frequently that a cosigner is required on those. particularly if it's one of the first loans that a student is taking out on their own name. So that's something to keep in mind is, do I have somebody who would be eligible to co-sign on a loan? Essentially a co-signer, what that means for anybody who hasn't used a loan previously, is it's someone else who signs onto that loan and commits to helping with repayment if the primary person who is borrowing that money does not start repayment when it's required. So a co-signer does take on a little bit of that risk. So that's just something to keep in mind if you're asking someone to be a co-signer. And it also usually pulls the co-signer's credit for a credit check. The private loans are going to have a varying interest rate. So all federal loans in the year that they're borrowed have a set interest rate that it'll give you on the federal financial aid website. So you know exactly what that interest rate is going to be when you either apply for that PLUS loan or accept the unsubsidized loan. Whereas with private loans, they determine your interest rate based on your credit worthiness typically, and that separate application that you do. So we do see for some students, maybe they can get a better interest rate from a private lender with a co-signer than they can through, say, the PLUS loan application. Typically, the unsubsidized loan is still going to have the lowest interest rate of really anything we see. But when you're looking between a PLUS loan or a private loan, if you're looking at additional loan funds, it may be worth just kind of comparing those two things to see what may be a better option personally. We also have a resource out on our student financial aid website as well that's called Fast Choice. So that's the screenshot here on the left, is it lets you filter through all of the different private loan lenders that have ever worked with Ohio State and sent funds to us for a student, just to kind of see who's out there and what the different lenders are. And then the last note on private loans is they typically have a different repayment structure than federal loans. Federal loans, typically they do change sometimes from year to year, but usually about 3 to 5 different repayment plans that you can use. Anything from just a monthly based repayment plan to pay it off in a certain amount of years to income based or financial hardship type repayment plans on those federal loans. Private loans are typically less flexible in that if you take out, say, a 10-year loan, then it has to be repaid in 10 years. So they won't look at income or anything like that after you graduate to determine how much is owed. It will just be when that loan goes into repayment, you have that monthly payment that you'll have to begin paying. Okay, so now that we've kind of reviewed the types of aid that can be awarded, I just wanted to pull up a sample graduate student financial aid package in comparison to the cost of attendance budget and talk about how that money actually works in reality. So we'll see for this particular student, they were awarded that $20,500 in the unsubsidized loan that we talked about. And then this student also opted to apply for some additional graduate plus loan funds. So we see their total loan balance there for the year was the $31,336. So when you compare that to the total cost of attendance for 1 year here at the bottom, you'll see they're still within that cost of attendance budget. So that's what's determining, hey, they can't go over that total cost of attendance amount. But you'll also see when you look at like the tuition and fees field of this cost of attendance budget, that the amount that they've been awarded in loans obviously is more than the tuition and fees that are directly billed by the university. So I want to talk a little bit about what happens with that money when you have more loan funds than what's going to cover your tuition and fees. So if we look at this slide, what I did here is I pulled apart these loan amounts and did a 1 semester example of what this aid would look like on a statement of account where you're paying your fees as well as a refund back to the student and how that can be used. So remember, any financial aid that is borrowed that's federal aid, so the unsubsidized loan or the PLUS loan, divides evenly between both semesters of enrollment if we're assuming this is a 2-semester full-time student. So that means that their 1 semester loan disbursement would be right around this $15,330. So that's the total amount of loans that they're eligible to receive. The tuition and fees they're being billed through Ohio State is going to be that $6,212. So what's going to happen is the loans are first going to pay all of those tuition and fees. And then any funding that's available and left over after that is paid will come back as a refund to the student. So that refund can be used for these other things on the cost of attendance budget, like living expenses, buying supplies for their program, those kinds of things. So that's where that refund comes into play. And then I also put a timeline here at the bottom, just because the timeline doesn't always coincide with the normal way like a lease might work. So I know a lot of students budget in a loan refund to help pay their rent, but then don't anticipate that that refund isn't going to come back to them until later on in the month. So they might have some issues with rent payment timeline. So that's a sample timeline here at the bottom. This was based on the most recent autumn semester here at Ohio State. So just kind of something to keep in mind is those refunds don't always come back immediately because there's a specific time that universities are allowed to disperse financial aid before the start of the semester to generate a refund out. Now, you don't have to use loans to generate a refund back to you at all. That's just an example that this student decided to do. Other examples we see of this is maybe a student receives some type of external funding or an employer payment to help cover some of their fees, and then they're getting a refund of some of the loans instead to help with the living expenses. So we see different combinations. This is just an example to kind of help give a feel for that. And then the other big piece I want to talk about here is what we call smart borrowing. So this is saying, how much in loan funds do I personally actually need? Because that answer is different for every student going to school anywhere at any time. So I know some students will just borrow all the way up to that cost of attendance budget to make it easier to say, okay, well, at least I know I'll have enough money now. But that's not always the wisest thing to do when we're talking about loans, just because at some point those loans are going to be due back. So this is kind of a very simple way to determine what that budget might look like for you. So the first thing you want to do is know what your expenses are. So what are my tuition and fees going to look like? What's my rent and utility average? Am I living independently? Am I living with roommates? Am I living with a parent to help save money? What are these different things and different options I have for my living expenses? What does my average grocery bills look like for my food each month? And then on average, how much do I spend on things like books and course supplies? So that's kind of where all the expenses fit in. I know some people as well that when they decide to go to grad school may have kids or a spouse, and those are also things to just think about. Am I going to be also paying for childcare, things like that? And then in the middle here, we have know your income. So you want to know how much income is going to be coming in to help pay those expenses first, before we start talking about using loans to cover any gap. So am I going to be working at all, or do I have some other type of earned income? Am I receiving maybe a fellowship, assistantship, or scholarship that's going to help reduce those expenses for me? And if so, what is that going towards? Is it paying towards my tuition? Is it a stipend to help with my rent? Where is that going? And then as well as first that Stafford loan. So the Stafford loan is the overall loan program for the unsubsidized loan. So that's what that's called. So then you can say, okay, do I want to use this unsubsidized loan as my income as well, since it's going to be my lowest interest rate loan option available, unless you're one of those folks that is eligible for the health professions loan. So now that I know what's coming in to help me with these expenses, do I have a gap between the two? And if so, how much is that gap? And then how much of that do I want to cover with additional loans? So that's when you look for things like the PLUS loan or the private loan. So those are kind of a gap filler, so to speak. So that's kind of how you can think about aid and how much additional loans you may need based on what you receive from other sources to help cover the expenses if you decide to do grad school. There's also a really cool tool out on the student financial aid website, the federal financial aid website, so not Ohio State's, and you'll see the little link up here in the corner, and it'll also be on a slide here in a minute. But there's a really cool way that you can go in here, and either if you already have loans right now, you can log in and it'll give you this payment estimator. Or you can enter in, okay, I anticipate I'll use a total of $30,000 in loans across my 2 years of graduate school. What would my monthly payment look like afterwards, to kind of help you just get an idea for what that is and plan for that down the line. So it is a really cool way to look at what that reality would be before you're in it, before you're already living it, after you have that degree and you're looking for employment or you're in your new job. And then we also always recommend, like, compare what is that payment going to look like for those loans versus what's my anticipated income from whatever degree I'm working on, and how do those two things compare? And then finally, it also gives you a good picture of what the public service loan forgiveness program looks like. So I'm not going to go a ton of like in-depth information about this, but it is something that exists if you're anticipating going into a nonprofit field where you may be eligible for some loan forgiveness using a specific repayment plan. So that's also something to think about if that kind of rings any bells in your head of what your kind of future career is looking like. Okay, and then the last couple of slides here, I just have a list of different resources and things that I've kind of touched on here in the presentation and links out to them. So I believe the PowerPoint was shared as well, so you can go out to any of these. I just want to hit on a few of them and highlight them that I haven't talked about yet in the presentation. So first, over here on the left, the Military and Veteran Services Office is a great resource for any of our students who are either active or veteran students in the military, with a lot of really great resources and information on how different military benefits and things play into this conversation. And then right underneath that, the Scarlet and Gray Financial Office. Also a really great planning tool. So if you're thinking about budgets, or even if you just want help with a budget right now, they're a great office on campus that can help you go through that. They have different like budget spreadsheets and things that you can complete for yourself to kind of know what that's looking like. And then this just kind of has, again, different resources here at the university. I put in the graduate school link here to find information on fellowships if that's something you're interested in, as well as anybody who may be interested in working at Ohio State later. I know there's also an employee tuition assistance program, as well as if you have any parents that are employees at Ohio State. So that, I'm sure if you have a parent here, you've heard about that one. It's something that you can look at. And then I know down here, I also had just some basic COVID information for that link. I think a lot of us are very familiar with that at this point. And then finally, this is our Buckeye Link contact information. So if you have any other questions that you think about down the line, or when you're applying for grad school, things like that, feel free to reach out, give us a call. This is what we specialize in, and kind of knowing the ins and outs of AIDS, so we can help students figure that out, because it is kind of a whole new higher ed language to learn. So definitely let us know if you have questions, even if it's just general stuff as you start looking at graduate schools. We're there to help. So yeah, with that, I am going to go ahead and pop into the question and answer box here. Sorry guys, I know you're probably answering some of or asking some of those as I went, but I'm just not able to see them on screen share. Okay, so I have one question here that I see.
I'm happy to help you with the questions if you'd like, Jessica.
Yay, okay. Thank you. I thought I heard you and I was like, I think Carolyn's popping back in here.
So the first question we have is, do we have to wait until we get our SAR in order to apply for the Grad Plus loan?
Yes, great question. So for anybody who doesn't know, I know that SAR that's being referred to there, that's the student aid report. So let me go back into this really quickly. So in order to do the PLUS loan application, you do have to have completed the FAFSA and have it confirmed basically on the federal end. So that's usually when you get that email with your student aid report information in it and it's sent out to the schools. You don't always have to wait until you actually get a financial aid package from the school you've applied to and sent the FAFSA to do the PLUS loan. But as long as you have time, like processing time, like you're not doing your financial aid super close to like a payment deadline, I usually say wait until you have a financial aid package from that school before doing the PLUS loan, so you can know how much that PLUS loan that you want to borrow.
We have another question. What will financial aid look for a student in a PhD program?
Gotcha. Also a great question. So the PhD programs are similar in that it's just the loan availability that we talked about with these three big loan pieces here. So it is those that you're kind of looking at still with a PhD. I would say the big thing to keep in mind as a PhD student is that aggregate lifetime limit of loan usage. So we see some students who maybe do like a 3-year or 2-year master's program and then go into a PhD program. You'll want to kind of keep an eye on total loan amounts that are borrowed to make sure you don't go over that lifetime limit. But in terms of what can be offered through a FAFSA application, it's very similar. The other big caveat I'd throw in here is some students, when they start that, their actual course enrollment is below half time. And so you just want to keep in mind that if you enroll less than half time, then any loans you may be eligible for in that semester aren't able to disperse out. So if you're going to only enroll like 3 credit hours instead of 4 one semester, there are some kind of ways around that as a post-candidacy grad student. But typically, if you're going to be enrolled less than half time at all, just something to keep in mind, the loans typically can't go out in that case.
We have another question. Let's see.
Awesome.
If I was a dependent in 2019 and did not file taxes then, what tax information will I put on the FAFSA? Should I add my parents? I've heard it's optional.
Okay. Yes. So if you were dependent on parents' FAFSAs in 2019, so let's say you're looking at grad school for the 2021-2022 year, which would be that next FAFSA that's looking at 2019 tax information. Since you're still independent, you won't have to include the parents' information, and you'll just indicate on your FAFSA that you did not file taxes in that tax year. If you had any kind of incomes, like some students will have income, maybe they worked over the summer or something, but the income threshold isn't high enough to require that you filed taxes, so you chose not to file, then you'll still report any income that you had like listed on a W-2 for that year, but you would just indicate that you did not file taxes, and that's totally fine. It won't cause any issues with getting aid if you didn't file taxes. You can add your parents. It is optional though. So if you, especially if you know this middle loan actually that's up on the screen here, the health professions loan, if you know you're going into a health professions field that may be eligible for this loan, go ahead and add that parent information. It's not going to hurt anything if you add it and didn't need it, because you'll still be considered independent when it comes to financial aid awarding, and that unsubsidized loan amount will still go out there for you regardless.
We have another good question here. I wanted to ask, read to you rather. When can we apply for the special scholarships? When will the applications be open?
Yes, that is one of the most popular questions in our office right now. We anticipate it'll be open by the end of October, so within the next few weeks. The reason for that, usually it opens a little bit earlier, around the same time the FAFSA opens. This year it's a little later because we are revamping the scholarship application a little bit. Like I said, the name might change. We're still waiting on the final word on that. You can still find it in the same place, and I would say end of October to early November, start looking for it to open up for you.
I don't, let me see, I think we have answered all the questions, but I guess I have a question for you. Last week's sessions, Jessica, related to fellowships, which is another source of aid for prospective students to consider. So how does the fellowship process marry with scholarship, marry with loans? And particularly at OSU, how do all those pieces and parts come together? And do you have any wisdom you can share with our participants?
Yes, absolutely. This is a great question, and we hear particularly from first-term grad students about it every year. So I love getting to kind of talk about this beforehand. So this is very specific to Ohio State and how it functioned here at our school. So for us, those fellowships are awarded through the graduate school program office. So what that means is in financial aid, in our like kind of separate office in Buckeye Link, we don't know a student has that fellowship award until we get that master list from the grad school to let us know, hey, these are the students receiving these awards, and these are the types of their awards. Once we get that list of information, that's when we update it on the page that looks like this top screenshot. So this student example is one that didn't have a fellowship at all. They just had loans. But let's say we go ahead and award that unsubsidized loan for a student, but then we find out they're fully funded through a fellowship with a stipend or something like that, which would put them over their cost of attendance budget. We'll reduce the loan to make room for that fellowship to all fit in there so they can get all of the free money, so to speak. So the money you don't have to pay back. We always want students to use that first. So if you get in, say, a scholarship after the fact or a fellowship is awarded after the loan is awarded, just know we'll always reduce the loan first to make room for that more desirable aid to go out for that student instead. And then when we get in that information as well, usually updates on the aid summary within the first like week or so of receiving it. And then you get an alert as well from OSU if you're on the app, or you'll get an email saying, hey, something on your financial aid package changed. And that's when like the letter that was received saying that you were awarded the fellowship is actually reflected on that aid summary.
So then you would say that as prospective students get different forms of aid, that you're updating the notices that are sent out to them so they can just sit in the pocket and not have to worry about how does this connect to that our system defaults to give them that information and updates.
Yes, exactly. So anytime we alter something that shows on an aid summary, an automatic email goes out to a student that just says, hey, your aid package has changed. It's not super descriptive. So a lot of times that just prompts a contact to our office to say, hey, I got this notice that something changed. I can't quite figure out what changed or why was this removed. And we can always help walk through all of that nitty gritty as well. The biggest time that I think we see questions when something has gone sideways with that process is a student who's expecting a fellowship to apply, but it just isn't showing on their aid summary by the fee payment deadline. So then of course we get concerned students like, my fees were supposed to be paid, but it's still saying I have a balance and now I'm getting a notice about late fees. And there's usually something with either we haven't gotten the information from the graduate school yet that the fellowship was awarded to that student. I know particularly this year we saw delays with that just kind of across the board with everyone being a little behind. And we usually refer back to their specific fellowship contact to say, hey, let them know that it's not on your account yet. See if that's normal. It may just be something that's running behind, and then we can work with you on late fees if it is like a university thing that's going on.
And this would be a great time for them, I think, Jessica, to default to your PowerPoint where you had that slide of all the offices, you know,
yes.
where they would need to contact. So if they had that question with respect to the, you know, the fellowship, they could
yes.
potentially reach out to that office, the grad, you know, so they have those sources. Because
yes.
we're a large campus and the units have to talk to each other. And sometimes as much as we want them to talk a little bit faster, sometimes things just get delayed, and but we don't want them to be sitting in that pocket where they're worried.
Yes,
they
exactly.
have the contact information where they can reach out to specific units. Okay, we have a couple more questions. Is there any way to make your application for special scholarships more competitive? I've done it every year and never received scholarships from it.
Yeah, that's another good question here. So for that one, since there isn't a lot in the special scholarships application that is like essay based, so to speak, it's just looking at kind of, so say we have a donor that says, I want to do a $1,000 scholarship for 5 students who graduated from a high school in, you know, Cuyahoga County. So we have some donors like that give us like the criteria that a student has to meet. And then along with kind of some sub criteria, because we're probably going to have more than just those 5 students. So typically, if something isn't being received, it's just maybe there isn't a scholarship out there right now. that matches exactly that student profile. So there isn't really a great way to make it more competitive, just because it isn't like a standard scholarship application where we're like reviewing a lot of like essay information, things like that. It's usually more of like a checkbox situation of, do you meet the criteria that the donor set? And since their donor set criteria, we don't have a lot of flexibility in our office to change what that donor wanted in terms of awarding. Really the only other time that we do that is like if we have a scholarship that has sat like unawarded from that application for a couple of years, we'll reach out to that donor and say, hey, we're not able to award this with like the current criteria. Is there any way you would expand it so we could award it to, you know, more students? So that's kind of the downside of that, is it is kind of throwing your hat in the ring each year to see if there's anything out there you may qualify for. I would say a little bit of a caveat though is departmental scholarships. So depending on what your major is, different majors, this is kind of undergrad specific, but there are also some grad programs that might have their own departmental scholarships. It's a little bit more limited though. Some departmental scholarships do not run through the special scholarships application. So it may also be worth reaching out to like an advisor or a program contact to see if there may be something in your major specifically that you could be competitive for that isn't awarded in that same way. I know sometimes we see more luck from that if somebody has tried kind of a few years on that special scholarships application and nothing has come out of it.
Thank you, Jessica. We have another question. When will award packages be sent out to students?
Yeah. So if it's a student, I'm going to kind of go through a couple different application cycles because it depends on when the student's applying to start. So if a student is applying to begin a grad program in autumn of 2021, so next autumn semester, then usually once they get their admissions decision from the graduate program, so let's say they're admitted, once a student's admitted into their program, that's when we pull in that FAFSA information that they sent in. So you could do the FAFSA like right now because it's open for next year, but if you don't receive an admissions decision till say like July of next year or something like that, because you don't apply until then, we won't actually receive that FAFSA information until that time. The exception being if you're a current undergraduate student, we're going to get it sooner because we're already pulling in information for you as an undergrad, and we'll see you have that FAFSA out there and pull it in because you're already a student. So it can look a little bit different depending on current student type and which like application cycle that you're in. But usually that aid information gets sent out, I would say, probably about 2 to 3 weeks after an admissions decision is sent, as long as the FAFSA was already completed before that time.
Next question, may I apply for the special scholarship as a prospective student?
Yes. So any prospective student type is able to complete that special scholarships application. When it goes live, I know in the past years, it's actually had 2 separate buttons that you can click. One is a current student and one is a prospective student. You'll want to make sure to pick that prospective student link because the current student link will ask you to log in with your last name, number, and password for Ohio State. So prospective students would want to use that other link. And you can apply at any time once you know that you're going to apply to Ohio State as a student.
Okay. I don't see that we have any other questions. Do you have anything else you'd like to share with the participants before we wrap up today's session? Jessica?
I think that's kind of all the high points. I'll just do another shout out to reach out to financial aid offices, either at Ohio State or if you're looking at a different school. If you have questions, like I said, it's something that it is very normal to have questions on and have no clue what this information is until you ask or kind of do it the first time. So know there's resources out there for you. And kind of like Carolyn was saying, we're a big university, which means we have a lot of resources, but it also means resources can be hard to find sometimes. So even if you don't know where to start with a resource, you can start with BuckleLink or you can start with the grad school and say, hey, this is my general question. I don't know where to go. And we will help guide you to kind of that end goal because we know it's a big place and that not all offices are able to be in constant contact to be able to link up students the way that, you know, we want to sometimes. So yeah, but thank you.
Well, Jessica, thanks so much for all of this wonderful and valuable information you shared with us today. I wanted to tell the attendees, thank you for attending today's webinar. If you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to the presenter, Jessica. Before we end our session, please remember to attend next week's session. And lastly, as a reminder, you will see a 1-minute survey pop up on your screen. Please take a moment to fill it out. It would be really beneficial for us to get your feedback. We thank you again for attending today's session, and we hope to see you at a future one. Take care. Bye-bye.